Marcus Reed is introduced not through conflict, but through continuity. He is the current steward of a 12-acre property in Pine Ridge, North Carolina, held by his family since 1952. His connection to the land defines both the history and the future dispute. The spring-fed lake at the center of the tract, known locally as Grandfather's Lake, has been part of the Reed family's life for generations. Marcus's grandfather cleared the original path of gravel leading to the water's edge, while his father secured county permits in 1987 to construct the small dock that still extends into the lake today. Each board, nail, and post rests on officially recorded approval, establishing a paper trail that predates any modern neighborhood association. Marcus maintains the same patterns established decades earlier: fishing at dawn, tending the cypress trees, and watching the blue herons that return every season to nest. The scent of honeysuckle in early summer still drifts across the lake, and the same spring water that once supplied his grandfather's cattle now feeds the pond and keeps its clarity. These sensory details carry documentary value because they confirm long-standing, continuous use of the property and its natural resources, facts later relevant to jurisdictional limits and property rights. 15 years ago, the calm perimeter of the Reed tract changed. Developers purchased the adjacent farmland and laid out an 847-home project named Willow Creek Estates. Marketed for its manicured streets, gated entry, and upscale country living, home prices began around $600,000, and marketing materials described views of the private lake, though that feature was never included in subdivision ownership. During early negotiations, the developers attempted to buy Marcus's parcel outright, hoping to integrate the lake into a future clubhouse amenity. Marcus declined, keeping the family land independent. Construction proceeded and the new community rose around his boundary. Roads, sidewalks, and decorative lighting defined the periphery, while the existing lake remained within Marcus's deeded property. With completion came a homeowners association to enforce uniform standards, paint colors, landscaping, exterior materials, and other aesthetic rules. But those covenants applied only to the 847 participating lots. Marcus's parcel, recorded decades earlier, stood entirely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Most of the new residents were courteous. They greeted Marcus when jogging past his fence or launching kayaks nearby. The contrast between their planned environment and his generational property was visible, but initially peaceful. Yet the seeds of friction were implicit in structure, a private tract with documented pre-existing rights surrounded by a community governed by new covenants. That structural divide between recorded independence and collective conformity would soon determine every legal argument, inspection, and board decision to follow. The story of Willow Creek Estates begins here, grounded in lineage, documentation, and the enduring presence of one family's lake. Vivien Blackwater's arrival at Willow Creek Estates marked the shift from quiet coexistence to procedural confrontation. 6 months after moving into a Lakeview home, she organized neighbors around what she called enhancement campaigns, advocating for aesthetic uniformity and strict enforcement of HOA covenants. Within that short time, she was elected HOA president. Her first formal act reached beyond the association's boundary lines. A certified letter to Marcus Reed asserting that his unsightly fishing activities disrupted community harmony and lowered nearby property values. The letter bore the official HOA seal and a list of alleged violations, including claims that the existing dock failed to meet subdivision design standards. Marcus consulted Tom Martinez, a real estate attorney familiar with property covenants. Martinez reviewed the documents and confirmed the governing principle that would frame every future exchange. Property predating an HOA cannot be bound by its later created covenants. Marcus's 1987 dock permits and 1952 deed precluded HOA authority. 3 months later, Vivien escalated the matter through county channels. She filed a complaint describing an illegal dock structure encroaching upon community water. The assigned inspector visited, reviewed the archived permits on site, and closed the case immediately. His report validated that the dock complied with all recorded approvals and predated the subdivision itself. For Marcus, that inspection should have ended the discussion. Instead, informal harassment replaced formal claims. Each morning during his 6 a.m. fishing routine, landscaping crews arrived along the adjoining property line operating blowers, mowers, and chainsaws for emergency maintenance. The mechanical noise and diesel exhaust cut through the stillness that once defined the lake. These operations coincided precisely with his fishing hours, creating a pattern of disruption that felt deliberate, though never stated. When nuisance failed, documentation returned as a weapon. Vivien commissioned a professional survey team equipped with high-grade instruments to remeasure the boundary. After 2 days of data collection, a registered letter arrived, alleging that the dock extended 6 inches beyond Marcus's property line into community waters. The president filed a county-level property encroachment lawsuit based on that claim, complete with filing fees and stamped pleadings. Simultaneously, she publicized the dispute through the Willow Creek Estates Facebook group, framing Marcus as a non-compliant neighbor resisting community standards. By the close of this phase, a cordial boundary had become a coordinated campaign involving correspondence, complaints, and litigation. The once local disagreement over a permitted dock now stood as a test case for jurisdictional limits between long-recorded private property and the expanding reach of a new homeowners association. The formal survey completed at Vivien Blackwater's request concluded with an assertion that Marcus Reed's dock extended exactly 6 inches onto community water rights. Within days, a property encroachment suit appeared on county dockets. Its language cited the HOA's governing documents, even though those documents explicitly applied only to member parcels. The filing converted neighborhood friction into civil litigation. At the same time, Vivien intensified social influence. Posts on the HOA Facebook group portrayed Marcus as uncooperative and indifferent to shared values. Photos of his dock circulated with captions about non-compliant structures. The rhetoric implied negligence rather than lawfulness, aiming to isolate him among residents. Marcus responded not through argument but research. Spending an entire weekend in the county courthouse, he examined deed books dating back to the early 1950s. Beneath dust-covered folders, he located the original 1952 instrument conveying his grandfather's land and, critically, exclusive rights to the entire lake system. The deed granted all water rights, surface and subsurface, including natural springs and tributaries, in perpetuity. This clause redefined the conflict. Ownership of the water body itself, not merely its shoreline, belonged to the Reed family. Armed with that document, Marcus met again with attorney Tom Martinez. Together they drafted a countersuit alleging harassment, slander, and abuse of legal process. The response reframed the dispute. A pre-existing property owner defending long-held rights against unfounded enforcement attempts. Service of the countersuit became its own public event. During an HOA gathering hosted by Vivien Blackwater, a sheriff's deputy entered her backyard carrying court papers. Witnesses described conversations halting mid-sentence as the deputy read the summons. Vivien's outward composure cracked into visible anger as she accused Marcus of intimidation. The moment undermined her reputation as a controlled professional leader and exposed the conflict to community scrutiny. This stage cemented opposing narratives, one based on documented history, the other on perceived neighborhood order. The encroachment claim, built on inches, now confronted a deed measured in decades. Marcus's discovery introduced a precedent question. When property law and HOA governance overlap geographically but not legally, which authority prevails? By the end of this period, litigation on both sides was pending. The HOA president's initiative to impose aesthetic compliance had provoked an evidentiary reversal that favored the property owner. Yet the dispute center was shifting beyond paper boundaries toward environmental oversight, setting the foundation for regulatory involvement that would soon eclipse neighborhood politics entirely. Following Marcus Reed's countersuit, official vehicles began arriving with surprising frequency. Within a single week, inspectors representing multiple agencies appeared: Fish and Wildlife, the Environmental Protection Agency, County Health, and local code enforcement. Each carried clipboards and forms referencing anonymous complaints. The first inspection cited potential disruption of migratory bird activity. Agents observed Marcus's quiet shoreline, took brief notes, and departed, finding no violations. The EPA team arrived next, equipped with water testing kits to investigate alleged contamination. Results showed clean readings. County health representatives sampled soil near the dock. Code enforcement reviewed structural elements. Each report concluded no actionable findings. The cumulative effect was clear: a barrage of procedural visits without substance, consuming time and signaling organized harassment. During this period, Marcus met Dolores Martinez, a retired county clerk known for institutional memory of Pine Ridge land records. Over coffee, she recalled that the Willow Creek Estate subdivision had been built atop designated wetlands. Development permits from 15 years earlier required preservation of natural water features in perpetuity. Such language meant that altering drainage or discharging waste could violate federal environmental law. With this context, Marcus examined the activity of the same landscaping crew frequently stationed near the property line. Early morning observations revealed debris and clippings entering drainage channels connected to his lake. He began systematic documentation, photos stamped with time, date, and GPS coordinates taken from the tree line. Over successive weekends, the images showed patterns of dumping, fertilizer-soaked waste sliding into protected wetlands. Cross-checking business registrations identified the contractor as Pristine Landscaping LLC, 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivien's husband. The evidence package, photographs, permit references, and ownership data, was forwarded to the EPA's regional office. Federal investigators initiated their own inquiry. Within days, Pristine Landscaping came under formal review for environmental violations. County contracts tied to the firm were suspended pending outcome. For the first time, consequences reached beyond the neighborhood into the business interests connected to its leadership. The failed attempt to discredit Marcus through regulatory pressure had produced the opposite result. Instead of proving non-compliance, it exposed violations by those closest to the HOA president. The conflict's center of gravity shifted from nuisance complaints to environmental law, positioning the next escalation, the chemical dumping incident, as both foreseeable and catastrophic. The environmental turning point began with a business card tucked beneath Marcus Reed's windshield wiper. The logo belonged to Clearwater Solutions, a commercial algae control company. Days later, while Marcus and his wife were visiting family out of town, the company received a cash order for an emergency lake treatment. According to service logs, the caller identified herself as representing a community association concerned about a hazardous bloom on shared property. Payment $3,500 in cash was delivered in person. Upon returning home, Marcus noticed the odor before the view. A sharp metallic scent hung over the water, and the lake's surface shimmered with an unnatural blue-green hue. Fish floated near the dock, including the large bass locals had nicknamed Big Bertha. The once clear spring water had turned opaque. He contacted the county's environmental emergency hotline. Officer Jim Patterson, a veteran field investigator, arrived within hours carrying portable test equipment. Patterson's analysis detected copper sulfate concentrations consistent with industrial-strength algicide. He classified the event as felony-level property destruction with potential federal implications. As the officer documented samples, the acrid combination of chemicals and decay confirmed that the lake's ecosystem was collapsing. Neighbor participation soon produced decisive evidence. Security footage from a doorbell camera across the road captured a Clearwater Solutions truck at 2:17 a.m. Two figures in protective suits unloaded containers, poured liquid from hoses into the lake, and departed by 2:43 a.m., 26 minutes sufficient to contaminate 70 years of heritage. Laboratory testing conducted the next morning revealed copper, sulfate levels 4 times higher than EPA drinking water standards. The lake's inflow springs connected directly to the aquifer, supplying every home in Willow Creek Estates. That hydraulic link transformed private vandalism into a community health threat. Patterson's interim report cited probable environmental crimes under state and federal statutes. Marcus, reviewing the results, recognized a deeper irony. The contamination could migrate through the same underground channels the subdivision's wells depended upon. The algae treatment, misrepresented as a community safety measure, now risked poisoning the very homes whose residents once complained about his dock. The immediate landscape reflected the damage. No birds or insects remained near the shore. The cypress roots were coated with residue, and the water carried the dull sheen of metallic salts. Photographs documented each stage for evidentiary continuity. The event redefined the dispute's scale. What began as an aesthetic disagreement had escalated into an environmental and public health emergency, supported by measurable data, chemical assays, time-stamped video, and official testing logs. It marked the moment when the case moved irreversibly beyond neighborhood governance and into criminal jurisdiction. After the contamination, Marcus Reed returned to courthouse archives to strengthen his position. Within the original 1952 deed, one paragraph stood out, including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to the underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity. This clause confirmed ownership of not only the visible lake but the entire spring network feeding it. He compared that document to 2008 development filings for Willow Creek Estates. The developer's permit applications referenced independent wells drilled directly into the same spring system, yet contained no record of water rights acquisition. In legal terms, the subdivision had been drawing from a source it did not own. For 15 years, 847 households had used water legally tied to the Reed deed. Recognizing the scope, Marcus and attorney Tom Martinez assembled a response team. Environmental lawyer Rebecca Torres joined to coordinate multi-jurisdictional filings, a federal action for unauthorized water use, an EPA referral for contamination, and state-level civil claims for property damage. Hydrogeologist Dr. James Mitchell conducted on-site mapping of spring channels, concluding contamination would reach every home within 6 to 8 weeks. Investigative journalist Sarah Morgan documented the evidence trail to ensure transparency and deter suppression. Their strategy emphasized restoration and accountability rather than collective punishment. Rebecca Torres drafted a settlement framework. Marcus would waive approximately $30.6 million in theoretical back-use fees in exchange for full ecological remediation. Vivien Blackwater's resignation, and creation of independent oversight to prevent future abuse. Dr. Mitchell designed an 18-month restoration plan using bioremediation, native restocking, and continuous testing. Additional support came from earlier discoveries. Dolores Martinez's wetlands records demonstrating developer obligations, and Patricia Morgan's growing concern over HOA financial irregularities. Each element built cumulative pressure. By linking environmental evidence, deeded rights, and governance accountability, Marcus's team transformed the case into a coordinated legal architecture. The next stage would unfold publicly as contamination spread. Residents experienced health effects, and regulatory agencies verified the scientific findings that underpinned every claim. Within weeks of the lake incident, residents of Willow Creek Estates began reporting metallic-tasting water and stomach discomfort. A local pediatrician noted increased gastrointestinal symptoms among children from the subdivision. Social media posts described pets refusing to drink tap water, and families relying entirely on bottled supplies. Vivien Blackwater issued official HOA statements, attributing complaints to seasonal mineral variations. She simultaneously proposed a $500 special assessment to finance water system upgrades, a measure interpreted as billing homeowners to remedy her own actions. Behind the scenes, her efforts to suppress evidence intensified. She contacted Clearwater Solutions owner, offering $10,000 cash to destroy service records. The owner recorded the call and reported the bribe attempt. Vivien also hired private investigator Rick Patterson, whose surveillance of Marcus ended in arrest after he attempted to open Marcus's truck at a hardware store parking lot. The investigator's license was already under probation, further discrediting the effort. Vivien filed anonymous complaints to the state contractor board alleging Marcus's solar installation business lacked permits. Each accusation was investigated and dismissed, but the process consumed time and expense. Anticipating further escalation, Marcus documented all interactions, legally recording phone calls under North Carolina's one-party consent law. Financial transparency within the HOA collapsed. Board member Patricia Morgan identified a $3,500 expenditure labeled Landscape Emergency Services, corresponding to the algae treatment payment. When Vivien refused to release receipts, board confidence eroded. Meanwhile, 3 fake Facebook accounts propagated false claims that Marcus had staged the contamination for profit. The disinformation affected his business reputation, resulting in canceled client contracts and vandalism of his vehicle. Parallel to these internal disruptions, EPA inspectors conducted subdivision-wide well testing. Preliminary results confirmed rising copper sulfate concentrations, consistent with Dr. Mitchell's projection. Federal officials prepared to issue an advisory warning. By month's end, community pressure reached the boardroom. Parents demanded accountability. Investors discussed declining property values, and a motion to remove Vivien Blackwater as president gained majority support. The stage was set for a decisive public meeting where health data, deeded rights, and law enforcement findings would converge, ending months of misinformation and transforming private conflict into collective reckoning. The Pine Ridge Community Center filled beyond capacity for the emergency meeting. Residents stood along walls as television crews positioned cameras at the back. Sheriff's deputies managed entry while the EPA team set up projection screens. Board President Patricia Morgan opened with procedural remarks and yielded the floor to Dr. Sandra Murphy of the Environmental Protection Agency. Displaying charts, Murphy reported copper sulfate levels roughly 4 times above federal safety limits. The contamination source was traced to chemicals introduced at Grandfather's Lake, spreading through the aquifer that supplied residential wells. Asked about culpability, she stated only that a criminal investigation was ongoing. Yet her direct glance toward Vivien Blackwater conveyed implication without words. Murphy concluded, and Patricia Morgan invited Marcus Reed to speak. He carried the 1952 deed and read aloud the paragraph granting all water rights, surface and subsurface, in perpetuity. Addressing the crowd, he explained that while the subdivision's wells drew from his family's spring system, he would not pursue back payments, approximately $30.6 million, if restoration proceeded cooperatively. His statement shifted the atmosphere from outrage to measured relief. Attorney Rebecca Torres summarized the legal posture: federal environmental, state embezzlement, and civil claims supported by video evidence, recordings, and HOA financial records. The audience murmured as deputies moved toward the stage. Sheriff's Officer Daniel Price announced a warrant for Vivien Blackwater on charges of environmental destruction and obstruction of justice. Her protestations of conspiracy were drowned by the rustle of spectators and camera flashes. The arrest ended 7 months of escalating conflict in a single visible act. Following her removal, Marcus presented the restoration proposal: joint funding through HOA insurance and restitution, independent oversight and community participation in environmental recovery. The board voted unanimously in favor. Residents applauded the plan that balanced accountability with protection of innocent homeowners. The meeting's documentation, EPA findings, legal evidence, and filmed arrest became the definitive public record. For the first time, the narrative aligned science, law, and governance in one transparent forum. 18 months after the contamination, Grandfather's Lake again reflected clear morning light. Under Dr. James Mitchell's supervision, bioremediation processes, water cycling, native vegetation, and restocked fish returned the ecosystem to health. EPA tests confirmed contaminant levels below detection thresholds. The site evolved into a community learning space rather than a contested border. Funding derived from a structured settlement. $250,000 from Vivien Blackwater's personal assets and HOA insurance created the Grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust. The trust financed restoration and environmental education for local students, teaching conservation and regulatory compliance. Legal outcomes followed documented evidence. Vivien pled guilty to environmental destruction, embezzlement, illegal dumping, and obstruction. The federal court sentenced her to 3 years imprisonment, 5 years probation, $75,000 restitution, and 200 hours of waterway cleanup. Her law license was revoked, and subsequent divorce filings ended her public career. Within Willow Creek Estates, reform replaced secrecy. Patricia Morgan led revisions mandating open budgets, homeowner approval for large expenditures, and resident rights clauses protecting pre-existing properties from overreach. Quarterly reports became standard, ensuring accountability. Marcus Reed's relationship with neighbors shifted from suspicion to respect. Saturday fishing events reopened under environmental monitoring. Families gathered along the restored banks during the inaugural Spring Lake Festival, proceeds supporting county conservation programs. Broader impact extended beyond Pine Ridge. 3 North Carolina cases later cited the Reed precedent in resolving water rights disputes. Law students analyzed the litigation structure in environmental policy courses. State legislation, inspired by the outcome, passed the Senate establishing penalties for HOA harassment and mandating financial transparency. Professionally, Marcus's solar company expanded into environmental consulting, advising property owners facing similar conflicts. Journalist Sarah Morgan's coverage earned national recognition for investigative reporting, prompting renewed debate over HOA accountability nationwide. The documentary closes on a restored dock beneath evening light. Herons return to their nests, water laps softly against the original 1987 boards, and the scent of honeysuckle signals continuity rather than loss. From conflict emerged restoration, governance reform, and a model for coexistence between private rights and collective responsibility.